And welcome to a special Friday the 13th, Friday for Future edition of our Global Climate Hotspot Roundup. This is a special feature of the OBX Wave Report, where we discuss all things waves, weather, climate, and beach lifestyle. And in particular, today we're going to be focusing on climate and specifically on the events that have impacted California. Now, in a recent episode, I did point out some medium to longer range models that show that California may be seeing a respite in the severe events that have been impacting California since late December. And we certainly hope that that does happen, but I don't want to in any way downplay the impacts for California. California right now is reeling under record rainfall and flood conditions, and there is an ongoing discussion about what level of aid needs to go to California to help it recover from the severe impacts of the recent barrage of storms. I want to talk about some of the underlying conditions that have impacted California and some of the reasons why we are seeing these extreme events. And it is worth noting that, according to climatology, California does sometimes receive severe flooding coming in from the Pacific Ocean. That's an underlying base climate condition, but there are changes that are likely or very likely impacting California right now, as far as coming from the climate system and helping to increase the severity and intensity of the storms that impact California and the nature of the land of California, how it responds to heavy rainfall, for example. And what we have seen in California is both a weather whiplash type situation where California has gone from severe drought or intense drought to severe rainfall. And the severe drought has baked the lands, and so it makes it less easy for the lands to absorb the moisture when it comes. And then when the moisture has come, it has come in the form of intense series of events over a few weeks, and so actually rather concentrated moisture, and so like the rainfall and heavy rains come all at once in this big dump, and that makes it harder to manage the water for human uses like agriculture and things like that. Now, this big whiplash is something that climatologists have been talking about for some time now, that as temperatures rise in the Earth climate system, that the West Coast tends to see more extremes in the form of drought and extreme rainfall, with an overall prevalence for drying in the US Southwest, but that when the rains do come, they come all at once in these big events. And that's what we've been seeing. What we have also seen in particular with these storms is that there are two major factors that are involved. One is an atmospheric river or a series of atmospheric rivers pointed at California. And you see this stream of moisture running off the equatorial Pacific and then pointing toward California. And then what we've ended up with is bundles of this moisture just coming in, getting scooped up by storms and then swept into California in the form of these atmospheric rivers. And then in addition to that, we've had a number of bomb cyclones out here in the central Pacific that have intensified very rapidly, adding intensity and strength to these impacts as they run into California. So you've got both the atmospheric river, this river of moisture in the atmosphere, and the bomb cyclones that are sweeping in. The underlying conditions for the Pacific, and the main underlying condition that is visible, at least to me, from an observational standpoint, and I want to hear from the climate scientists specifically on these conditions, but from the observational standpoint, we have this crazy warm pool in the north central Pacific, and then we have I'll switch to Fahrenheit so you guys can see the anomalies. So you can see this 6 to 7 degree Fahrenheit above normal water temperatures in the northern Pacific. And it's in this region where the bomb cyclones have tended to form, in this area where the ocean surfaces are radically warmer than normal. And then for the North Pacific, you have just a hot ocean. It's just a hot ocean environment in the range of 1 to 2, 3, maybe 4 degrees Celsius, Fahrenheit above normal in the Eastern Pacific, where we get the origin of this atmospheric river. So it's heat on top of heat. That is the base condition that has been sending these atmospheric rivers and bomb cyclones toward California. And the bomb cyclones have intensified rapidly. They've been very deep. They've been very powerful. They've been extraordinary oceanic storms with huge waves and powerful surf and gale force to sometimes near hurricane force winds. And then you just have this massive flow of moisture. And we've been talking about evaporation, and over a large ocean surface, you get evaporation, and the warmer the waters are, the more evaporation you get. And it's pretty obvious to me, in my opinion, that what we are seeing is, events related to the evaporation of moisture off the surface of the ocean, providing more impetus for the atmospheric rivers events that we've seen, and more force, more convective force that allows for the rapid intensification of storms in the Pacific as they swirl into California. And so these are likely climate fingerprints, and we'll see what the science has to say, but I just want to show you the observations. Now, BBC News Today recently provided an excellent report a few hours ago on California's devastating storms, and yeah, so I recommend that you go and check out this BBC News article. But I just want to pull some highlights from this article and cite it for you. So California's devastating storm in maps and charts. And right now, from December 26th to January 9th, parts of California have seen 6 times more rain than normal over the period. So you got massive amounts of rain. Santa Barbara is one of the hot spots and has seen 16 inches in 2 days. So 16 inches of rainfall in just a 2-day time period. And even though we see the potential for storms to start to let up in the mid to long-term models, there are still parts of California right now that are under the gun for up to 8 inches of rain over the next 2 days. And this seems to be focusing more toward Northern California. So hopefully we're starting to see a little bit of a respite for California, but still under the gun for heavy rains over the next few days for some regions. And a key river in California, the Salinas River, is expected to remain at flood stage through January 17th. And this is one of the rivers that has been the source of the major flooding that Californians have experienced through the course of this series of bomb cyclone and atmospheric river events. All right, so let's go down to the weather maps and talk about, I've talked about the impacts and the reasons why we've had these impacts. Let's talk a little bit about the good news. And the good news is that the weather and climate models I said the weather models and the medium to long-term weather models do show the storms tending to abate a little bit for California. And so let's look at the global forecast system model here for the West Coast. And you see the most recent storm coming in and, dumping a lot of rain and precipitation on California. And then you see the northern areas continuing to get some precipitation. And then you see a little bit of a break in through the middle of the model here. And this is looks like a 4 or 5 day break, although you do still get a little bit of precipitation coming in with a little impulse forming over Southern California and then the mountains, but not too much. And then Yeah, so things tend to remain clear, it looks like from January 18th through the 26th, but where you get another impulse coming off the Pacific, but this one appears to be quite a bit milder in through the end of the model. So it does look like the forecast, the middle to long range forecast, which can still be taken with a little bit of a grain of salt because these tend to be a little bit less accurate, are pointing toward a drier type condition for California, which is very thankful, which we are very thankful for because California has been hit so hard. So let's hope that that does line up. And as I noted yesterday, it does appear that high pressure systems tend to move in these models. This is the global forecast system model by the mid-range of the model and start to interrupt the storm flow as the storm flow starts to head on toward the north and east toward the whoa, look at that. That's a big one. So yeah, big storm heading into toward the Aleutians and storms heading in toward Alaska and Canada more in this model with storms, bombing out through the Aleutian chain and high pressure systems blocking for the most part weather systems coming in through the US West Coast. So storms just right on up west of Alaska and in some cases through the Bering Sea and into the Arctic. So hopefully California will get a break, but the events in California have been record breaking or near record breaking in many cases. We'll have to see what the after storm reports are for this particular event, but definitely a historic event for California as a series of atmospheric rivers and bomb cyclones rose up from the Pacific, a much warmer than normal Pacific Ocean, to create weather havoc across California in particular for flooding and for also other types of severe weather like extreme winds, very high surf, and extreme snowfall as well, and all of the things that come from that, power outages, severe road flooding, cancellations of schools, and disruption of infrastructure. So a very, very powerful series of storms having impacted California since late December and into now it is January the 13th, and we expect this to continue at least for the situation to continue for at least the next couple of days, and then hopefully things will start to moderate. Now I'm going to show you the 8 to 14 day outlook coming from the Climate Prediction Center, where we see cooler than normal temperatures and below normal precipitation predicted for California in the 8 to 14 day time period. So I do hope that these longer term models and predictions, mid to longer term models and predictions are correct. But I did want to highlight the oceanic features, particularly the warmer than normal sea surface temperatures that likely impacted and enhanced the severe weather coming into California since late December. So thank you for joining me for this special Friday for Future episode of the OBX Wave Report, and I will be back with you shortly.